This short recording covers the importance of record keeping. My name is Chris Tosland and I'm in charge of PGR training and development across the School of Medicine and Population Health. This is a compulsory session that you should watch, and it should only take around 5 to 10 minutes to cover the content. As always, I want to point you towards all the information which is contained within our school-wide PGR handbook, which is accessible through this link, and you should have already had access to this handbook. It is always going to be your point of reference throughout your PGR studies. So record keeping. Well, this is one of these tasks which is critical for both lab-based and non-lab-based research. Typically, you may have heard of things such as lab books, and therefore, if you are not doing lab work, you may think it is not relevant to you. But it is a critical requirement and a legal requirement in many cases for all elements of research which are performed. They can be in paper format, such as a book, or they can be electronic. The university can supply lab books, and you can talk to your admin teams about those. And when it comes to electronic options, there's many different platforms available, but you can also use systems such as quite simply using a Google Doc. Importantly, please talk to your supervisory teams about what type of methods they wish to use, especially when it comes down to electronic systems. They may already have one in place. If not, if it is a system which you can set up yourself, you need to make sure that your supervisors have access to the information and it can be shared freely with them. Record keeping is about keeping a daily journal of your research activity. So it does not matter whether you're in the lab or if you are conducting research such as surveys or interviews. You can also use your lab book to document discussions, meetings and plans with your supervisory team, so all critical information is kept within one place. The records that you keep, they're actually the property of the university, but they're also the reference for further research which will build upon what you have been performing. Therefore, it is really important that you pay a lot of attention and keep a lot of effort towards producing really good records of your research activity. So beginning with non-lab-based projects, the type of information stored within your record-keeping book or your research journal would be, for example, progress with interviews, interview data, databases that you're accessing or databases that you're using, modeling that you're performing, analysis, surveys, so on and so forth. The key thing here is that your record is a tool to show and monitor your progress. You should complete things in chronological order and make sure that your notes are accessible for the wider research team. As I said, it's important that what you do can be interpreted by other members of your research team and also future members of the research team. Try to, as much as possible, complete it daily in real time as you do it, and link to data resources that you've used or data resources that you generate. A few really important points to elaborate a bit further on here is that if you're using databases or data sets, note down the dates and versions, because there may be updates in the future to these databases or data sets, which can therefore change the content of those databases, and that could change the impact of what you analyze versus people in the future. Same occurs that if you are doing modeling, you need to also state down what sort of software or code are you using, where is that code located if it's something which you've written yourself, and also keep dates and versions. Again, these things can be updated and changed quite frequently, and that includes the same basis of the types of analysis that you're doing, which can link into the types of software or code that you may be performing, whether or not that's modeling or not, or focus more just solely on the terms of the data analysis. And again, it really is important because things can become updated so much that if you try to repeat what someone else has done, you need to try and find the right version of the analysis software in order to conduct that repeat of that work and build upon it as a foundation going forward. Switching now to lab-based projects, very similar in terms of it being a chronological tool, keeping a record of everything that you're doing on a daily basis. But what's contained within these lab-based projects is that you have a record of every experiment you perform And this is actually really important if there ever comes down to disputes over intellectual property. The lab book is a legal proof of when something was done, therefore, who was the first person to do it, who was the person who did that work, and therefore it's a really good document to have if there's any disputes in the future. You should note down the methods that you're doing, in particular thinking about reagents and samples, equipment that you're using, the results that you generate, and conclusions that you take from those results. To go into these a little bit more detail, when it comes down to the sort of methods, reagents, samples, batch numbers, really high level of detail needs to be in here so it can be repeated. Typically, this is more than you would find in a research paper. These can be the little tips and tricks to work that you need to have this to be repeated by someone in the future. Again, when it comes to equipment, note down the exact equipment and the settings that you've used. There can be variations. It could be a certain piece of equipment may not even be working properly in the future. So actually, they want to know which piece of equipment you use to do your work. For results, always note down things which are positive and negative. A negative result is just as useful for a research group in the future, so someone does not repeat the work that you have performed. Show all the calculations and insert all data, blocks, images, etc. into your lab book so it can be seen. Likewise, though, you can also cross-correlate your lab book with data resources which may exist on the web or stored on external hard drives if they're high volume data sets, for example. With conclusions, you can also think about, what does this mean and how to take it to the next steps. That also applies for non-lab-based research as well. A few practicalities. If you're using electronic records, you need to ensure that they're backed up and accessible. You do not want to lose all of your records. As I say, it's also a legal requirement to keep records. When it comes to the detail, you need to make sure that you can understand it. So could you understand it and follow the protocol in 3 years' time? So as you start your PhD now, when you get to the end of your PhD, you're writing up your methods or you need to go back over some of your data. Can you understand it? And importantly, could someone else follow your notes in the future? If you switch between work packages at any stage, can you make sure that you cross-reference? So if you finish some work on page 5, but you pick it back up again on page 10, make sure it is cross-referenced so people can switch between it. It's very normal to switch between work packages during the course of a week. And the research record should be in chronological order and not just grouping work packages together. Complete it daily, and if possible, just complete it in real time. This avoids the use of scrap pieces of paper, little notepads, or avoid leaving space to complete things later. Get it completed as you do it, and this avoids anything being lost. And importantly, discuss with your supervisors and supervisory team. They'll provide guidance on how they want you to keep records and how to sort of perform this record keeping activity. Do not use slang or abbreviations. Equally, do not use language which is too technical. You want to sort of make it open, as accessible as possible to people so it cannot be misinterpreted. If you also keep everything to factual statements, this also helps the fact that people will not misunderstand what you're trying to say. If using paper-based journals, ensure that ink is permanent. For example, if you're in a lab-based setting, many solvents could strip away ink quite easily. Therefore, you want to make sure all your records are safe, so use permanent ink. If you've made an error, whether that's an error in an experimental protocol or an error in terms of using the wrong data set, firmly cross out and highlight that this is an error and it's been crossed out on that basis that this was done wrong, I made a mistake. So with that summarizes this short video recording on record keeping. If you do have any questions, as always, please contact me and email me, and I look forward to hearing from you should you need to discuss this further.